So as this quarter is coming to an end and it's time for all of us to reflect on the work that we've done, um, I'd like to reflect on some of the successes and failures that I've had and the lessons that I've ultimately learned
from being in this class. So to get started,
I like to talk about some of the successes that I've had. So, for one, I've definitely became way more proficient in my research methods, and I've been forced to cut out some of my lazier tactics because I've been called out on them, and that's definitely needed in a class like this. But as far as my failures go, I think they all stem from trying to take shortcuts in the research process. And I didn't really know, well, I learned this period that when you do that, you're really just hurting yourself. With that being said, I'd like to move on to some of the lessons that I've learned. The primary lesson would definitely be to not shortcut yourself, don't cheat yourself. Because when you cheat yourself, you're not actually experiencing any growth, and all the pain that you go through, all the failure that you go through is ultimately helping you grow into a better person, a more well-rounded person, a better researcher. So speaking of being a better researcher, I'd like to introduce my topic, which was initially the link between MSG and insomnia, but as I actually did more research, I actually just brought in my topic to the all-around effects of MSG on the brain. And I'll get into that later, but right now I just wanted to tell you guys how I got the idea to do this topic. So I was actually eating at Spicy Yum Yum with one of my friends, and I actually got up really early in the morning that day and had a meal at Spicy Yum Yum, and I just could not go to sleep at all. I felt absolutely terrible. And my friend actually took a bite of his food and threw it out after.
and was able to sleep that night, so I knew it had to be something to do with the food.
So just skipping ahead a little bit, I actually interviewed my mom who just got her master's in public health. And what she had to tell me actually did a lot to fortify some of the stuff that I had read in the articles and about the Chinese food syndrome, and it was actually 100% the food that had me up all night and had me feeling terribly. In some cases, people actually had to go to the emergency room after consuming high amounts of MSG. So for my field observation, I actually just split the week up and ate good foods half the week and ate foods high in MSG for the other half of the week. And the difference in how I felt with my sleep schedule and just my overall mood was astronomical. And this actually had me questioning why anyone would even deal with the type of foods that are high in MSG. But it wasn't until I did more research that I found out about the process of clean labeling, which is pretty much just using an identical analog of MSG so food companies can put on the label that they have no MSG and eventually sell units. And with an increasing number of people caught up in the health food craze, companies are really taking advantage of this and just using it to sell more units by really being dishonest and lying to their customers. This practice isn't only morally wrong, but it's actually dangerous, and companies that do stuff like this should definitely be penalized. Whether if it's just paying an all-out fine or having to recall their products for a certain amount of time or indefinitely, these companies need to feel some sort of blow. They're multi-billion-dollar corporations that are just making a huge killing just by putting up a false front and taking advantage of customers. This stuff is seriously not right. The human brain is the control center of our body, and without the right nutrients, it's hard to ask someone to be a productive member of society. Additionally, human beings have the right to live a healthy life, to be able to not have to play a guessing game every time they're hungry. So with that being said,
When companies use processes such as clean labeling, they're actually denying citizens the right to a healthy life, especially when they're using compounds such as MSG, which is actually detrimental to brain activity. And considering the fact that children are usually the ones that are stuffing their face with Doritos and all types of garbage, it's important to consider the youth when discussing this. In President Obama's term as presidency, he actually made numerous steps to ridding schools of foods that contain high MSG counts, but in Trump's presidency, he actually went and refuted Obama's claims and tried to encourage these foods. Considering the fact that a good night's sleep is integral in a child's development, it's important to note that MSG has been directly linked to insomnia as well as headaches, which actually are one of the leading causes of insomnia. Just being up all night, not being able to sleep because you have a splitting headache. Which actually brings me to our next point that MSG actually is directly linked to migraine headaches as well. When you take into account the direct correlation between migraine headaches and MSG intake, it's evident that this is a very dangerous chemical to be putting in your body. Additionally, during my field observation, I actually noticed that not only was my sleep schedule affected by the intake of MSG, but my overall mood was affected. I was just feeling more agitated, had a shorter fuse for the 3 days that I was consuming foods high in MSG. And this definitely raised my eyebrows to the idea that MSG and behavioral issues are positively correlated. Furthermore, the more MSG that you're consuming is actually becoming detrimental to your brain, and in turn is going to be detrimental to your happiness. Especially considering the fact that we live in a country with such a high suicide rate, it's interesting to consider the idea that MSG intake and this might also be positively correlated. Moving on, a necessary step forward in resolving this issue with our food would be to focus on these food desert zones where people's number one source of nutrition would be from a McDonald's or a 7-Eleven. That's no place for someone to go and have to grocery shop. There's nothing in there that doesn't have a million additives and artificial flavors in it. So in conclusion, what I took away from this is that we definitely need to make healthy food more accessible. We need to penalize companies that are practicing clean labeling. And we really need to think about how these chemicals, especially MSG, are going to be affecting generations to come. With that being said, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I sincerely hope you enjoy my presentation.